We're going to start tonight with that child care crisis. Even if you don't have kids, or maybe you're past the age of needing someone to look after them during the day, the shortage of affordable child care affects everybody. After all, for so many parents, the ability to get daycare for their kids is the difference between whether or not they can stay in the workforce or need to stay home. A state Senate report back in December found that much of the child care workforce lives in poverty, 65% of them eligible for programs like food stamps and Medicaid. It also found that many people who run child care centers in New York take home little or no income at all because of their operating costs. What's behind this now is a national event today called A Day Without Child Care. In some parts of the country, child care centers actually shut down for today to show people just how big of an impact that would have on daily life. Here in Western New York, they didn't take action that drastic, but instead, many are marching as we speak through Delaware Park, and they're headed for a rally at the History Museum to send a message that the industry needs help. Joining us live right now is Sheri Scavone, CEO of Western New York's Women's Foundation. Thanks so much for being here. I know you're a big part of what you guys are doing here today. First off, we talked about some of the issues there. I know that's kind of really just scratching the surface. What should people know about the child care crisis right now, and what is the plan for you this evening?
Well, the child care crisis existed before the pandemic, and, parents couldn't afford child care. They couldn't find infant toddler slots as a business model. Those trying to sustain a child care business, it was impossible on the revenues, particularly those accepting child care subsidies. And as you noted, children were being provided care by individuals who were earning minimum wage and the lowest 2% of all occupational incomes. So that has to change. That fundamentally we have to really look at what do we value in the United States. And today, this rally and our press conference earlier and the march that's going on right now is about putting pressure on Washington to say, you know what, if we value something, we should fund it. And we can't, as you noted, have people going to work. 42% of women with children under the age of 2 left the workforce during the pandemic. Women were set back 3 decades of workforce participation when schools closed and many 40% of the child care centers closed. And so we know this model is absolutely fundamentally broken. It has to change if we're going to support our businesses, if we're going to support working families, and certainly if we're going to support child care providers that are small businesses here in this community.
Sheri, you mentioned the message that you're sending to Washington. I wonder about Albany. Of course, Governor Hochul made a big deal of her budget, including $7 billion in an investment in child care over the next 4 years. What is that money going to do to help some of the issues that you mentioned there, and is it enough?
Well, over the past 2 years, the legislature has been really vigilant in taking up the recommendations of the New York State Child Care Availability Task Force, which I, as the Western New York Women's Foundation, was honored to serve on, as well as a couple of child care providers from this region and others from across the state. And what we're really trying to do is build toward universal child care so that child care is available and affordable for all families, regardless of their income, regardless of where they live, and that we recognize this early development as essential to the future of our workforce. We know that 85% of the brain growth is in the first 3 years, and yet we've got a privately funded system in the first 3 or 4 years, and then we move into a publicly funded system. So there's a huge disconnect. And what we have been able to do over the last couple of years through the state efforts is increase eligibility for families. It will be going up to 300% of the poverty level, which will open the door for a lot more families. And we have begun to increase the market rate to pay the child care providers who accept child care subsidy for our most economically disadvantaged families to get a little bit more. But it's not enough. It is not going to stop child care centers from having to close because the business model, again, is fundamentally just doesn't make sense.
As you said, the pandemic sort of exacerbated this problem that existed prior to it. But how did things get so bad, get to where we are now? Or were we just not paying as much attention before? Because it does seem like right now it's just a problem that's gotten bigger and bigger.
Right. Well, I think, we didn't give voice to the problem. The reality of it is this is a gender, racial, and social justice issue. So, over 90% of childcare providers are women, and over half of them are Black and brown women, and they didn't have a voice. And as we have begun to elevate that voice, to engage that voice, it's part of what you see and hear going on in the rally right now. That voice has been elevated to say, we can't continue doing this. We are caring for our most vulnerable, for our children. And we just can't do it when you can't make the bottom line meet. If you can't balance your checkbook, then, you're in trouble. And that's essentially what's happening with these businesses. So, costs have gone up. Reimbursement has not significantly gone up. Again, they're paid well below the cost of childcare. Erie County stepped forth, and a lot of credit for the leadership of Erie County for funding a Cornell cost of childcare study to give us at a local and state level real ammunition to say, here's what is paid for children on the subsidy system, and here's the reality of the costs. No one is going to engage a business model like that just doesn't work. So I think that we've been able to elevate the data around the issue. We've been able to elevate the partners we've brought to the table. Everyone's watching New York, I will tell you. And national partners are coming in to assist us to elevate the voice and elevate really purposeful opportunities, such as Senator Brisport's statewide tour with Assemblyman Helvesy that you noted the report that came out of. They spent time in Buffalo. They spent time in child care centers. They listened to the very real issues of child care providers and business owners not taking home a paycheck. And we can't allow that. We can't fundamentally, as a society, allow that to continue. This is a racial, economic, and gender issue.
Finally, Sheri, I think we're out of time here, so I'll ask you to be very quick on this, but I know that you're calling for big fundamental change here, but is there any immediate action that you think is possible to happen in the short term? Is there anything that you're calling for there?
Well, at a federal level, certainly the reimbursement to providers and looking at cost of care instead of this kind of artificial market rate would be really helpful for child care providers, and it would begin to stabilize the system and give us something to build on. Right now, we can't get staff, we can't keep the doors open, and so really we've got to infuse the child care centers and providers with more money to be able to keep their doors open.
We've been talking with Sheri Scavone, CEO of the Western New York Women's Foundation, and again, an event right there at the museum behind you coming up at 6 o'clock this evening following the walk that is ongoing right now. Thanks so much for your time. It's good to see you.
Right. Thank you.
All right.